3 counties, 24 cities, working together, accomplishing more than any of us could alone. Whether your roots run generations deep, or you recently moved to Greater Portland, you are a part of Metro, the nation's only regional government elected by the people. Planning for the future, preserving what we love. Let's keep our region thriving for decades to come.
I'm Laura Lepley, a Metro Park Ranger. Here at Oxbow Park, safety is our #1 priority, not only for our guests, but for our staff members. I'm at the Welcome Center and you're at the Regional Center. The council chambers are located on the 3rd floor. In the event of a fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room. Go down the stairway to the 2nd floor, exit through the main entrance by the reception desk and gather in the courtyard outside that entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the reception desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you, and come visit us at Oxbow Park.
Metro Council business meeting of October 14th, 2025. To order. Georgia, will you please call the roll for attendance?
Yes. Counselor Lewis?
Present.
Counselor Gonzalez?
Present.
Counselor Simpson?
Present.
Counselor Wong?
Present.
Counselor Rosenthal?
Present.
And Counselor Nolan?
Good morning.
Good morning. Council President Peterson?
Present. Good morning. We need to start our meeting out on a sad note today, but I do want to recognize, and if any other counselors want to weigh in, we do need to acknowledge a moment of the passing of Representative Hua Nguyen. I know that several of our counselors were close with the representative whose district overlapped with Counselor Simpson and Huang. As the daughter of a Vietnamese refugee, she proudly stood up for her community as one of 5 representatives in Oregon, comprising the largest caucus of Vietnamese lawmakers in the country. She was a fierce advocate for children and students. Even while battling cancer, she sponsored a bill last session to improve chronic absenteeism for Oregon students, which passed the House unanimously. As we grieve her passing, I hope that we and all of our community leaders can carry forward her commitments to improving the lives of children in our state. Councilors, any other observations? Councilor Huang?
Thank you, Madam President. It was truly a sad day for our community and for Oregonians. Representative Nguyen was such a leader for the community and always championed the community causes that came up to her. And yeah, we were just, so proud of her and her accomplishments. And, anytime an Asian American's elected in Oregon, they're usually the first of something, and she really blazed the way for a lot of people. So her leadership will be truly missed. I also understand that in lieu of flowers, her family has requested donations be made to the David Douglas Educational Foundation, where she also served while also being a state representative. So yeah, just again, losses on so many levels, but I'd like for our council to consider from our sponsorship budget making a contribution to that foundation in her honor. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Simpson?
Thank you, Madam President. Hua was and Rep. Nguyen was a very generous and kind individual, big heart for our children, a warrior to the end. And, I don't handle death very well, but I just will say, well done.
Thank you. Then we take a moment of silence. as we move forward, we'll just keep her in our hearts and move forward her commitments. Thank you. I will now move on to the public communications portion of our meeting on non-agenda items. Georgia, will you please describe to the audience our procedures that we will use for public communication?
Yes, if you are testifying in person, please sign up by filling out a blue card in the back of the room and bringing it up to me. If you are testifying on Zoom or by phone, please sign up by using the raise hand function in the reactions or more menus, or by dialing *9. When it's your turn to testify, I'll call on your name or phone number. For those on Zoom, click accept to be promoted to a panelist. Your Zoom window will close briefly before you rejoin as a panelist. You can turn on your camera if you'd like. Testimony is limited to 3 minutes, and the timer begins when you begin speaking. If you are testifying in person, there are timers located at your testimony table, on the wall, and on the digital screen. Please state your name for the record before testifying. You do not need to give your physical address. And Council President Peterson, I do not see anyone coming forward with blue cards, and I do not see any hands raised in the audience.
Great, thank you. With that, seeing no one, again, running forward, we will close testimony on non-agenda items and move on to our first presentation, which is the Accountability Hotline Case 495, Prioritize Ethical Requirements to Set the Reuse Program Up for Success. Counselors, we have with us today Metro Auditor Brian Evans. Today's presentation focuses on the issue raised through the Metro's Ethics Hotline. Good morning, Auditor Evans.
Good morning, Council President Peterson and Metro Councilors. Thanks for the opportunity to present the results of this audit. As the Council President said, this is a presentation on what I'm calling Accountability Case 495. It was published earlier this month. The audit was initiated based on an anonymous report to the hotline that was made in May 2025. The purpose of the audit was to determine what controls were in place to ensure that the employee reuse standard operating procedures were that are used at the 2 transfer stations were set up to follow ethical requirements and meet customer expectations for electronic waste. For a little background, the standard operating procedure allowed employees to take certain materials for personal use under some circumstances. It contained a list of acceptable reuse materials like household cleaners, fertilizers, and building materials. It also included a list of prohibited materials like ammunition. To reuse materials, employees were required to weigh it, get approval, and sign a liability waiver annually. The standard operating procedure did not require employees to document what materials they took. The audit found that employee reuse violated Metro Code and the employee ethics policy. It also increased the chances that an employee could violate Metro or Oregon law. All 3 of those documents prohibit public officials from using their position for financial gain or to avoid financial costs. The audit, to align the employee reuse procedures with Metro Code and policy, any employee reuse materials would need to be either offered to the public first under the same terms and conditions as employees, or be made an employment benefit by Metro Council. Neither of those conditions were in place. Metro's transfer stations and household hazardous waste facilities are not set up to safely provide reuse directly to the public or to employees that don't work at those facilities. Metro's benefits handbook and collective bargaining agreements do not list reuse material as an employee benefit. In addition to not being aligned with ethical requirements, this reuse standard operating procedure was not followed. Laptops and other electronic waste were not approved materials for reuse. Some items that were taken were not documented with a proper approval. Some of the employees that, some of the items that were taken were approved by the same employees that took them, so self-approval. Some managers had their subordinates approve the items that they took. We also found that employee liability waivers were more than a year old, and some of the program's partners had not signed their liability waivers. Besides ethical and compliance risks, stronger oversight of the reuse program was needed to ensure Metro's services were transparent to the public. For example, Metro services for electronic waste state that it will be recycled, not reused. As such, customers would potentially be concerned if the material they dropped off is not recycled. Similarly, if household hazardous waste materials are reused, a customer may feel misled if it was given to somebody else who may or may not dispose of it properly. Metro's garbage and recycling facilities plan and regional waste plan both indicate a desire to increase reuse in the region. And those efforts are laudable because they could potentially decrease the amount of material sent to landfills or to other processing facilities. However, expanding reuse before facilities, policies, and procedures are adequately set up could undermine public trust and employee safety. The anonymous report to the accountability hotline that led to this audit was initially investigated by Human Resources at Metro with input from WPES management and the Office of the Metro Attorney. The investigative report omitted concerns about ethics. That omission showed a willingness to prioritize past practices over existing policies and Metro code. When management does not take prompt action, it increases risk for Metro and its employees. It also risks damaging public trust in Metro solid waste services. The audit included 6 recommendations. 4 were designed to strengthen controls for the reuse program, and 3 focused on improving compliance with ethical requirements. That concludes my presentation. I'd like to acknowledge the COO and WPES director and their teams for their cooperation during the audit, and happy to answer any questions you have now or wait until management's response.
Thank you. I think we'll wait till management's response, Council, and I'll turn it over to Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Metro Council President and councilors. Thank you, Auditor Evans. Management appreciates the auditor's attention to these issues and views this audit as an opportunity to strengthen program oversight and reinforce our ethical standards across the board. Public trust is at the heart of Metro's work. We recognize that maintaining trust requires honesty and accountability when things go wrong. The audit raised serious concerns with how our employee reuse practices were managed. We have responded to those concerns by taking decisive action to address them as quickly as possible, including by pausing the employee reuse program as soon as leadership learned the full extent of the concerns and initiating a review. Our goal today is to share the additional steps we've taken and how we're building stronger oversight going forward. From an organizational perspective, this moment also underscores the importance of continuous improvement and a strong ethical culture. We are reinforcing expectations for managers, enhancing training, and ensuring that compliance and ethics are built into our daily operations. Our goal is not only to correct what went wrong, but to emerge stronger and more transparent because of it. Every day, the public relies on Metro and WPES to manage materials safely, ethically, and in alignment with our mission of protecting people and the environment. In the case that triggered this audit, a computer was taken from one of our facilities. Simply put, that should never have happened. Electronics were never intended to be part of the household hazardous waste reuse program, and their inclusion represents a clear deviation from program intent. This deviation and subsequent information shared by the auditor raised a number of red flags for management that we are working to address at the leadership, management, and programmatic level. As I mentioned, as soon as it became clear that the scope of ethical concerns went beyond the actions of a single person, Metro acted quickly, pausing employee reuse in July. My office also initiated a comprehensive review of the reuse program that is ongoing. Our focus moving forward is on ensuring clarity, consistency, and accountability across all operations. While our wholesale review is not yet complete, we have enough information to agree with the recommendation to discontinue the employee reuse component of the program. The employee portion is being formally removed from the standard operating procedures. Work is also underway to improve documentation and transparency, including annual reports summarizing material recovery to strengthen tracking, reporting, and visibility of program outcomes. We are also currently working on strengthening oversight and internal controls, including an audit process that will regularly review records, ensure policy compliance, and identify corrective actions early. These reviews will also be utilized to help inform program consistency across operations and provide opportunities for continuous improvement. These actions are collectively intended to ensure that Metro's reuse program operates with stronger internal controls, clear accountability, consistent oversight, and transparent documentation, aligning with audit recommendations and Metro's environmental and fiscal goals. As we make these corrections, we also want to reaffirm the purpose behind the reuse program. For more than 25 years, Metro's household hazardous waste reuse program has helped prevent waste, save money, and reduce environmental harm. Each year, tens of thousands of pounds of usable products such as paint thinner, camping fuel, and cleaning supplies are redistributed for safe reuse rather than disposal. The intent has always been to safely reduce waste, reduce cost, and protect our environment. These efforts remain central to Metro's mission. The changes underway will make Metro's reuse program clearer, safer, and more transparent while preserving its environmental and financial value to the community. We take full responsibility for ensuring that all Metro programs uphold the highest standards of ethics, safety, and public trust. While this audit focused on a specific program, it is prompting a broader review of how we manage and monitor our longstanding programs in WPES and across the organization. Many of these initiatives were created years ago for good reasons, but as our policy, systems, and community expectations evolve, we have a responsibility to ensure that they evolve too. These actions reflect our commitment to continuous improvement, accountability, and integrity in service to the public, and to maintaining confidence of the communities we serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the quick response to the incident and the review, and very much appreciate the overview by the auditor in the scope. So, councilors, any questions on moving forward? Sorry, Councilor Huang.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Auditor Evans, for bringing this to our attention of the investigation, and thank you to the staff for responding so quickly. I understand and support the intent of our reuse program, and I see from a report that employees took home 11% of reused materials, with the rest going to a number of partners such as Habitat for Humanity or Gleaners and Dignity Village, amongst other nonprofits. And I guess my question is, I understand the ethical restrictions on public employees where, they can't have an opportunity before the rest of the public, but I do see most of the reused materials goes to partners, and I'm wondering about the interplay there, like what are the rules and restrictions on these other reuse partners? Do they have first dibs, and if a computer went to them, would that have been acceptable? So just, what's the difference between?
If I may, Auditor, I'm going to ask our legal, our attorney to just weigh in quickly before you respond.
Yeah, I think, so the focus of this audit, as presented by Auditor Evans, was really with respect to Metro Code around use of position and the opportunity to obtain something that wasn't available to the public. We do know that this program has mixed, has served the public, as you just pointed out. The significant portion, 89%, I guess, if I'm using your numbers, went to public partners or non-Metro employees. But that doesn't change the sort of ethics as it applies to particular employees. So I think that Council President Peterson turned to me to sort of understand the nature of your question, to see if you're really asking for legal advice or if you're asking for more programmatic information.
I think it's just more programmatic. Okay. I just want to understand the difference of do these partners have access in a different way? And that's probably totally great because it's diverting, waste from a landfill, but just programmatically, what's the difference? I understand the ethical difference.
Okay, so President Peterson, I would say it's in someone else, whether it's Auditor Evans or a member of the staff who wants to answer that. I don't have those answers readily.
Auditor, and then Marta, if you feel like you want to come forward and help answer that question, thank you.
Yeah, Councilor Wong, thanks for the question. I think my mind goes kind of in three different directions, so I'll try to parse that out. I think first, to your main question, it was outside of the scope of this audit. So we didn't look at all around the ethics or the policies and procedures around the non-employee portion of the standard operating procedure. So just on the face of it, didn't delve into that much detail. I think the one touch point that we do have in this audit for that regard is that there is also a standard operating procedure for electronic waste. And I decided not to include a lot of details in this report because there's enough technical and kind of inside baseball criteria that goes on in these that makes it hard to communicate. But that standard operating procedure makes it very clear that there shouldn't be any electronic waste being reused. It's not even supposed to be at the household hazardous waste facility. It's supposed to be given to the contractor, and the contractor has responsibilities for recycling it. And so I think on the face of it, there's no path that I saw during my audit where any electronic waste should be being reused in the current functioning of the transfer stations. Marta may have more detail on that. And then I think on your other question, maybe around the program partners, I think the question from an audit perspective would be, how does Metro make the community aware that this opportunity exists? Is it because of relationships, personal relationships, or historical connections to different parts of Metro? Then there's probably a need for greater communication so that all parts of the community know that this is a resource that could be tapped. So that's where I would go there.
Thank you.
I can add on a little. My name is Marcia McGuire. I'm Metro's Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Department Director. I think underneath your question was looking at, are we providing opportunity for all nonprofit organizations within the region? I think there's an opportunity for us to look more closely into how we can strengthen that outreach. Many of the relationships that we have are longstanding. This program has been in place for more than 25 years. However, we do actively reach out to organizations because our intent is to redistribute, these materials back into the community. But I think there is a lot of this audit and work that we already had underway in the department looking at reuse within our internal operations is going to give us an opportunity to broaden that outreach as well as increase transparency. Part of the recommendations include the development of annual reports that we will be able to share out that I also think will help provide visibility into the program and opportunities for other nonprofit organizations to seek out these materials to redistribute to local communities.
Thank you. If I could just follow up, my understanding now is 100% of reused materials will now go to these types of organizations.
Correct.
So I would, expect that we would have the proper outreach and guidelines to maintain the integrity of a program.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Marta, it's individuals also, correct?
We have some individuals that have relationships with household hazardous waste that have been longstanding farmers that are seeking fertilizer that has been donated to redistribute in their crops. So there is some public access to the program. But again, that internal audit that has been done by the COO's office, we are looking to kind of look at how we can make broader improvements across the board around opportunity and access. And previously, we did have community events that brought materials out into communities that we coupled often with our bulky waste collection events, but those have decreased since 2020. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to reevaluate. As you know, reuse has been a major priority when we look at diverting waste from the waste stream. So I think there is a lot of opportunity to look at this long-standing program and how we can improve it to meet the dynamics of today's waste stream, but then also opportunities that we have in our communities.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis and then Councilor Rosenthal.
Sure, thank you. I am, kind of poking a little bit through the lens of Exhibit 3 at the players involved in the timeline. We have the hotline and the auditor's office. We have WPES, we have HR, we have OMA, and then we have Office of COO. And it looks like things moved as they should through a process that was fairly swift in terms of kind of a 5-week from notification to completion of both an investigation and a legal analysis. Yeah, I don't feel like we nailed it on communication. I feel like there was some cycles of questions of where this was and where it should live. So I'm wondering, one, from the auditor's perspective, you received a report and a month and a week later, you sent your start letter, which feels appropriate from my vantage point. Do you feel like that was appropriate? And then on the management side, where would better lines of communication be from the start?
Sorry, could you repeat the question, Councilor Lewis, to me about the timeline?
Specifically to you, there's 5 weeks there between your report received and getting enough information to send your start letter. Is that satisfactory to you?
It's a great question. I think what the place where the communication breaks down for me is the investigation looks pretty thorough and timely. until the investigation report lands at my desk. And within 5 minutes of reading the investigation report, it becomes clear that there's a problem and that there's an absence of information about ethical concerns. And so from my perspective, that's where the investigation breaks down. And so as soon as I get the investigation report, I ask for the supporting documentation and see that those ethical concerns have already been raised but are missing from an investigation report. And that adds another layer of problematic nature. There's the original incident, and now we have an investigation that's omitting pretty significant ethical concerns.
Even though HR flagged it for OMA and it went to OMA.
That's not my understanding of the timeline.
Well, it's bullet number 2, HR summarized the investigation to management and noted OMA's ethics concerns on 7-2. And then for 7-3, OMA concluded SOP did not appear to be followed and probably violated ethics requirements.
The ethical concerns did not come from HR, they came from the Office of the Metro Attorney.
Well, noted OMA's ethics. Okay. Different semantics. Thank you.
So to your question about communication, I think my observation of sort of this entire process is it's very difficult when you have a long-standing program to sort of get your bearings when there's a flare like this hotline complaint was. And I think from my perspective, what you see in WPES, HR, OMA, management, and my own office's actions is not an unwillingness to prioritize ethics, but instead an attempt to really understand what is going on to be fair to the parties involved, to be clear on what the facts are and what the scope is of the investigation, of the concerns, in an environment where there is often like conflicting or inconsistent information. So you'll see, in the timeline, it takes a little bit for our team to sort of get its bearings and understand the full scope. We achieved full clarity when we had our opening meeting with the auditor, and he shared the full scope of his concerns, and we took immediate action to pause the program and initiate the review. That review is ongoing. There's sort of layers to pull back, but at the end of the day, every public employee at Metro has a responsibility to know and understand the ethics policy, the state laws, and what that means for us as individuals, that we can't benefit, we're not a private company, we can't benefit from our position in any way. Unless, as the auditor said, it's a benefit, or the public has the same access to it. So regardless of how the process came forward, I think the clarity for us is this is an area that the organization needs more grounding in. I think people understand, ethical conflict of interest. It's a little bit easier. I think when it comes to personal benefits, and it's a little more challenging to identify. If you're getting a half bottle of cleaner, half-used bottle of Windex that someone has thrown away, is that really a benefit to you? And the answer is yes, because now you don't have to spend $5 on Windex. And I won't play the attorney today, but the value doesn't matter. If it's $1, $5, $500. So there's more work that we have to do to have that conversation, and I think that the tone at the top is really important. So that's to your communication. That's in my mind, that's what comes up, is talking about these things openly, being transparent, being very clear that if you're interpreting a procedure or a process to mean that you can benefit from something, it's time to pause and make sure that it's actually okay and do that evaluation.
Thank you. I think that's a satisfactory answer, both about communication, but also about the ethical questions being at the core of this entire process, both the formal and the informal. Thank you.
Counselor Rosenthal, and then Counselor Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I want to thank Auditor Evans for bringing this question, this audit to our attention. We can always improve things, and I also appreciate the response and the cooperation that we are getting from WPES. I am reminded of a situation a long time ago when I was working on one of the big landfills up in King County, and one of the people automatically took some recycled beer, several cases of beer, from the incoming waste, and it became a big deal. I mean, it was just a couple beers that were going to be thrown away anyhow, and they were going to be trashed. But they didn't have an ethical procedure involved, and it wasn't followed, and the employee lost his job, which is it was sort of humorous, but very sad at the same time. So I understand how these issues need to be paid attention to, even at the smallest level. I think that's important. My question is a little bit more technical. On the shot or the pie chart where you said 11%, I'm assuming that is based upon weight, and you, in your recommendations, you included a recommendation that some sort of type of accounting on the types of materials also. Do we have a, I mean, solid waste comes in many different kinds of sizes, shapes, colors, and uses. So do we have a clear identification of the kinds of categories that we would use if we were also tracking it on the reuse by type?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councilor Rosenthal. And I think it maybe gets a little bit to the COO's response as well from the previous question. The actual complaint here is that a laptop and other electronic materials were taken, and the employee admitted to taking those things. So we're not talking just about hand sanitizer. We're talking about potentially boxes of electronic waste that shouldn't have been at the household hazardous waste facility in the first place. And so the fact that an employee had access to those and also took them and also was approved apparently to have taken them indicates multiple points of failure, and it's not a disregard for what the value of them is. It's not following the procedure just flat out. So I think we need to be very clear about that. This is not just a laptop. This is multiple electronic pieces of waste.
From what I understand, however,
to your question about the pie chart, that's exactly the reason that the recommendation is in here. We can't have a procedure where we say certain things are acceptable and not have any way to know what's actually being taken. And in the current procedure, there's a list of approved, there's a list of disapproved, and then there's a category that says, and anything else that somebody says is okay. And so from an auditor's perspective, that's not a control. That's the appearance of a control. It's not well designed, it's not being managed, and it's not being monitored. And so those are very significant control weaknesses that affect multiple places where management can and should have taken more decisive action.
My understanding is that electronic waste would not be would be all diverted, would not be available in the future, right? And so that would be part of this pie chart, or would be separate?
My understanding.
In other words, are any of the listed people, whether it's Oregon Village Cleaners or Habitat, are they authorized to take electronic waste?
My understanding is that no electronic waste is supposed to be reused. Metro states to the public and on its recycling information hotline and its agreement with the contractor that operates these transfer stations and Metro's participation in e-cycles that electronic waste is to be recycled by an authorized recycler. And so any deviation from that is problematic, not only from the reuse procedure, but from Metro's agreement with its contractor, the contractor's agreement with its vendor that processes the waste, and the standard operating procedure for electronic waste.
And if I just may clarify and build on what Auditor Evans shared is, as you said, Councilor Rosenthal, electronics is part of the statewide stewardship program. We have laws in place for the recycling of electronics. At our transfer stations, they're accepted within the bays where we have bins where they're collected for electronics recycling. There are some times when customers come in through the household hazardous waste facilities, which are separate from the transfer station area, where customers will drop off their Windex in addition to an old charger or at times a laptop, and we take that just out of convenience, but it was never intended to be a part of the household hazardous waste program, as it's not intended to be collected at those facilities. With regards to the documentation around material type and weight, that is part of the recommendations that Auditor Evans has in the report, and something that we will be incorporating moving forward, both of those things, to be able to showcase both how much it weighs as well as the types of materials that are collected as a part of the program.
Well, and just to follow up on that question of type, is a smart appliance an electronic, or is it just an appliance?
Yeah, I think, and to me, that's the exact question, right? You get into these categories of waste where there's a much different risk profile and a much different environmental stewardship model. And if you're not being clear about what you're accepting and how you're managing it, it makes all of those regulations and safety protocols moot.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, President Peterson. Auditor, thank you for your report. I have to be honest, my bingo card today did not include dumpster brews, but I'm glad that we learned about that. I have a question in the highlights report that came up that I'm not sure if it's quite an area. This might be a question for Marta or for Marisa, but a question that's more oriented around policy. And I feel relatively concerned that from the pie chart that's published, that 1 in 10 or 10% of the tons that are given to Metro are taken by Metro employees. That feels like a relatively high number. And you talked about this briefly in your response to Councilor Lewis around the need to really define what that might look like a little bit more. What the pie chart doesn't share is what the trends have looked like of employee utilization before January 2025. We only have Jan to June 2025. So I'm wondering, is there an uptick? Is that 10%? Has that been pretty on average historically? And if it's a policy question, what is the appropriate percentage point that we should be striving for there?
That's a great question. Marta, do you have a sense for?
I mean, we would have to look at the data to be able to answer that question comprehensively. I would assume that it's relatively the same over time, relative amount of materials. But as noted in Marisa's response, we will no longer be having the employee reuse program moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Gonzalez, if I could just weigh in, the management response does include a full year's estimate of employee reuse, and it puts it at 10%. I chose to scope the audit just to 6 months because it was relatively easy to get a number, and I didn't want to belabor the audit process to go back farther. But there's records going back every year for at least 10 years, I would say, so the data is available.
All right, thank you so much. I had not seen that. Appreciate it.
Any other questions for the auditor or Marisa or Marta? All right. Thank you, Auditor Evans. We look forward to probably getting an update on this. You tell me what a good timeline is, 6 months, just on the change in the program. And I know that we're making other changes to the totality of not just the employee portion of the program, but totality of the program. Maybe we can get some updates then on how it's moving forward.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, we will move on to our resolution number 25-5539 for the purpose of providing up to $10 million to Washington County to support investment in programs to address unsheltered homelessness. I am pleased to have a former Metro staff person, now Washington County, Jess Larson, back in the room. Earlier this year, Metro Council provided greater flexibility in dispersing certain supportive housing service funds on a one-time basis for critical community needs. The first resolution we are considering today comes before us under that authority. And we have with us also Liam Frost, our interim director of SHS programs and housing. Liam, can I kick it off to you?
Of course, and I also want to mention that we have Director of Housing from Washington County, Molly Rogers, our colleague Nicole Sting, some other folks from Washington County. including Soy Capiano, who's a longtime member of the TCPB. So I just wanted to thank those folks for coming to the audience. For the record, my name is Liam Frost. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm the Interim Director of Housing here at Metro. Madam President, Council, it's good to be here with you this morning. As you're aware, Metro retains 5% of SHS tax collections to administer the SHS initiative, pursuant to the SHS measure and Metro Code. As Metro and the counties built up their programs over the last 5 years, revenue outpaced annual administrative spending. I'm sure you all recall that. As of February this year, Metro had accumulated approximately just over $30 million in reserves, which could be used for current and future administration of the SHS program. Over the past 18 months of SHS reform discussions, Metro discussed setting a portion of these funds aside to seed a regional fund for affordable housing development. However, due to urgent need for funding within current allowable SHS uses, Metro Council sought to provide flexibility to make strategic investments of Metro's administrative funds to support efforts of regional significance. In April this year, Metro Council adopted Ordinance number 25-1530 to enable disbursement of its administrative funds to local implementation partners for one-time investments in support of programs that otherwise meet SHS use of funds as directed by future Metro Council resolutions. At the time, Metro dispersed $15 million to Multnomah County, who then allocated those funds to the City of Portland to support Mayor Wilson's overnight shelter plan. The mayor will in fact be here next week to provide an update on the progress of that plan. Today, we're hearing from our colleagues in Washington County on their request for one-time funds to address urgent needs to fill budgetary gaps in eviction prevention and capital projects. So over to my colleague, Jess Larson.
Thank you, Liam. Good morning, President Peterson, members of Metro Council. It's a pleasure to be before you. My name is Jess Larson. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm Assistant Director in the Department of Housing Services in Washington County. And just want to begin with our note of gratitude. Our board is also in session this morning, and so none of our board members were able to join us, but have all remarked on our appreciation for Metro Council's leadership in using these to date unallocated resources to be responsive to regional needs across our communities in this urgency and changing landscape, continuously changing landscape of how we are managing our homeless responses in all three counties. So we appreciate this invitation and opportunity to make this request, and they regret that they were unable to be here, but I appreciate also our community partners and colleagues who are able to join me with this request. Next slide, please. So before I move into our one-time funding investment framework, I think the context I'd like to set before you is this is separate from our ongoing operations of the homeless system of care that Washington County has been able to build out, most significantly through the resources made possible through the regional voter-approved supportive housing services measure. So year over year, we are now operating more than 400 shelter beds in Washington County, which is a night and day change from before SHS, when we had 0 year-round shelter beds to serve single individuals in Washington County. Our outreach workers were quite literally trained to hand out bus tickets to help people access shelter in Portland. That is now no longer the case, thanks to your leadership and these voter-approved resources and that ongoing year-over-year operation of a homeless response system in Washington County. We've gone beyond those 400 shelter beds. We have more than 1,500 placements with rent assistance and wraparound case management services that are ending homelessness for households and helping them transition onto stability, whatever that might mean for them. Sometimes it's long-term rent assistance and sometimes it's time-based rent assistance. We have an outreach system of care, and we're building out capacity with transitional housing and access centers for other unsheltered individuals still trying to get into the system. And so these components of Washington County's response to homelessness, this system of response, are funded with those annual ongoing operating resources. And so aside from that annual operating budget, we will sometimes have one-time funding that is carried over from one year to the next similar to your unallocated admin resources. And so our board has recently adopted a framework in May of 2025, this spring, that helps inform how we will prioritize those one-time resources to respond to the various needs our system of care will face from year to year. The first level of priority is in financial protections. The second will be investments that address long-term sustainability of our system, like reinvestments in roofs and other capital infrastructure needs along the way. And the third would be considering new emerging opportunities to respond to community need. Now, this is a framework that our board will use to guide year over year how Washington County invests its end fund balance from one year to the next. As you can imagine, those financial protections include our reserves to ensure that we are restoring any lost or spent investments in our reserve funds. And so starting with those priorities and moving down the list with any one-time resources outside of our ongoing operating resources. Today, we are coming to your council with requests that address financial protections that we were otherwise unable to anticipate in our year-over-year budget planning. And so we found these gaps emerge in our system at the end of the fiscal year. So hopefully that framework is helpful to describe how we manage this consideration year over year in Washington County and how it relates to this specific request today. Next slide, please. So the proposal, the request from Washington County to your council today is for $10 million. Specifically, we are requesting $4 million to be used to restore our eviction prevention program that was not funded with supportive housing services. It's historically been funded with state resources. And as you may have followed along in the state budgeting process, was suddenly reduced significantly statewide by 60% reductions. This is a level of reduction that had instantaneous impact in Washington County. And we had to, our partners who operate that program had to close their phone line responding to households facing eviction prevention needs. Similarly, the second request is an emerging urgent need in that we have capital projects underway, contracts that have been signed, consultants and construction firms that have been hired, and new gaps identified in those capital budgets. And because we're building an infrastructure responding to homelessness, things like transitional housing, access centers, and shelter buildings, there are no readily available other capital resources to draw from in our state resources. So these two emergent needs are before you as one-time requests with your administration dollars. Next slide, please. I'll go more specifically into each of those individual requests. So starting with the eviction prevention program, as I mentioned earlier, it saw a 60% statewide reduction in eviction prevention funding for the next biennium because of financial constraints at the state level. So where we saw increased investments from the state over the last few years in shelter funding, we saw a significant decrease in eviction prevention. And this was not something that was anticipated by our partners or our SHS budget, if you will, or any of the planning along the way that led into this fiscal year. So immediately our partners who operate this program, Community Action, had to shut down their phone line. But to give you a glimpse at the scale of impact that their $3.8 million program, that's a biennium budget number, so over 2 years, on average, they are serving households with about, or they had been, or let me be clear, they had been serving households with about $5,900 per household to prevent evictions. These were households who had an eviction notice from their landlord. And we're able to demonstrate through their data that 91% of those households were still stably housed a year later. And the majority of households being served through this program historically have been single mothers between the ages of 25 through 44. So while this has not been a specific component of our supportive housing services program in Washington County. It has been a significant part of the ecosystem of our response to homelessness in Washington County, and we've relied on these statewide resources to prevent people from falling into homelessness and needing other SHS-funded programs in Washington County. And that is why this reduction, this sudden reduction, is having an immediate impact in Washington County. And we're asking for your consideration in helping us restore this program. We would use the $4 million request to restore it to full funding for the next 2 years in hopes that there's continued advocacy or efforts at the state level to restore that programming, or we can adjust our supportive housing services funded budget long-term to include it into our strategy for stabilizing households and housing needs in Washington County. So that is the first request, or first part of the request. The second project's underway. Next slide, please. So as you are well aware, as implementers of our regional affordable housing bond, there is rising costs in construction across the spectrum of everything you can imagine that goes into a capital project. We are seeing significant increases in costs, and with delays in projects, these can also contribute to cost increases. So a couple of our projects so far that are under contract and in development have come back to Washington County to request gap funding to ensure those projects can reach completion. And we would like to be able to make that commitment to ensure that those projects are seen through. We have a transitional housing project, a couple access center projects specifically, but we also want to make sure that these budgets don't just increase because of funding opportunities. So we are limiting this request to just projects that are already approved and had a developmental budget approved, and then we will do an evaluation of the cost differentials to the project and just use these dollars to address any gaps to ensure the completion of those projects. So that is the other $6 million for our $10 million request. And then my last slide is just a little bit of the background on how these requests came about. These emergent needs became known to staff in late spring, early summer, and we brought these conversations forward to our Solutions Advisory Council, similar to the SHS Oversight Committee. We have our own advisory body. Many of those members are here with us today, and they helped to advise and inform this request and finalize it. In fact, one of their recommendations is to ensure flexibility, and that's why you see the language up to $4 million, up to $10 million, because we want to be responsive to these changing needs as we learn more. We then brought the final request to our board in late August, and they gave their full support for us to bring this request officially to you here today. So that concludes my presentation, and I'll turn it back to staff, but happy to receive any of your questions.
Anything to add?
Nothing to add from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jess. Councilor Wong, you had a question.
Oh, yes, sorry, just a quick clarifying question. On the capital needs portion, the $6 million, I understand everyone knows our SHS dollars are pretty limited in terms of capital contribution. So I'm wondering if you could tease that out a bit more and like what makes this investment eligible in the legal framework, which I'm sure you thought through, but would love to learn more about.
Part of my interruption. Thank you, Counselor. I'm so glad that you asked this question. We have several capital projects underway with supportive housing services, one-time resources, and we appreciate Metro staff's guidance in clarifying how those resources can be used for capital investments and what conditions and requirements are a component of that. So all of these projects are consistent with that guidance. One of the key elements of Metro's guidance is that SHS resources should not be used for permanent housing. So none of these projects, and I have actually a couple extra copies of our capital reports, our capital projects report, where it describes each of the capital projects that have received funding, many of which have come to completion, some of which are in development and some are in pre-development. But all of those projects are consistent with the requirements that Metro has provided for any capital use of SHS resources.
So it's not permanent, and that's the distinction, okay.
Yes.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yes. Transitional housing, may I just make one more note? Transitional housing, while it has the word housing in it, it is long recognized more like a shelter program than it is a housing program because of the limitation on the household's participation in that program while they are there. So it's a bit of a misnomer. It's the language we use to describe it, but it's classified more like a shelter program.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis, then Nolan, then Rosenthal.
Sure, thank you so much. I appreciate the thought that went into bringing this proposal forward. I do think that splitting between eviction prevention and the one-time capital is smart. 60-40 is just kind of an art maybe. When it comes to eviction prevention, I'm sad that the state stepped back. I have hope that the state might get back in. Do you have an off-ramp if the state, I don't know, finds magic money? Because at this point, I don't know how they would. So my first question is there an off-ramp if there are other resources identified? Because the state's gonna have to do something. The second question is, we have in this measure defined population A and population B, and through a very expansive and embracing view of population B, I can envision almost anybody calling eviction prevention would be Pop B. If there is somebody who calls, who with good faith effort can't be put into Pop B, do you have any other resources where you can allocate something towards those people? Or are you going to have an eviction prevention program that first screens for Pop B status before assisting folks? Does that make sense?
Thank you, Councilor, for the question. Let me try to answer, and if I don't quite get the answer right, please try again. I think the nature of Pop B is, frankly, everyone else who might seek our services that isn't Pop A. And Pop A generally restricts the generally focuses our resources on serving chronically homeless households or other literally homeless households who have chronic homeless potential. Thank you. So for an eviction prevention program, we wouldn't really ever seek to serve Pop A because in order to be at risk of eviction, one must have a lease. And that generally does not define anyone in the Pop A category. However, we do use a lot of other flexible one-time resources to respond to homelessness, to help households who can afford ongoing rent get into housing. So overcoming barriers, paying those move-in costs, even paying upfront rent for a couple of months to get them started, and then they can take over their household payments month over month from there. So there are other kinds of one-time responsive rent assistance type dollars that do serve Pop A households that are a part of our supportive housing services funded ongoing operating programs.
I think I was very specifically asking about if somebody calls eviction prevention and they're not Pop B. Yes, they have the eviction notice, but they have no other characteristics of potentially chronically homeless. Will there be other flexible funds to help them? Or are we using a very expansive definition and just assuming if you're potentially going to become homeless and evicted now, chronic is an asterisk?
I'll try again, Counselor. Population B includes anyone who may be at risk of homelessness. So anyone who has an eviction notice is by definition eligible to receive eviction prevention resources.
Understood. And then off-ramp for?
Thank you for that question. I think that is an excellent question and one we were considering, and I'll be very direct with you all. I think that is less likely of a concern that we will find that, or an opportunity that we will find state resources restoring these eviction prevention programs, because all of the outlook we're hearing about the upcoming session and upcoming budget cycles for our state are look like there will be more and more reductions. So what we are most focusing on in Washington County is a longer term plan to incorporate eviction prevention needs into our ongoing home services system response.
Thank you.
Counselor Nolan, then Rosenthal.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks for the information. Am I missing something? The two items that you've described, Ms. Larson, affect all three counties. Maybe I should look to Liam for that.
That's true.
So I'm having a hard time understanding why we would appropriate funds just for Washington County to address those issues when Clackamas has problems with eviction prevention and underfunding. The state didn't say, well, we're just going to underfund Washington County and we'll fund Clackamas and Multnomah. So, and they have this, they're facing the same environment, the same market with respect to the cost, the escalating cost of construction. So if this is affecting all three counties, explain to me why we are recommending funds only for Washington County to address these issues.
Thank you for the question, Councilor Nolan. I think we're deferring to each of the jurisdictions to prioritize what is the imminent need that they can best use their our one-time funding to alleviate that need. So for example, Mayor Wilson came and asked for $15 million for the overnight shelter plan. Washington County and their board and their advisory committee have identified the gap in eviction prevention. We know that Clackamas County is in the process of developing a request. We don't know how they are going to prioritize their portion of carryover funding, but they will decide and come and make that request. And so this is Washington County's request.
I understand it, but I don't like putting Metro in a position that we're helping one county fix a problem that all three counties experience when we're responsible for making this a regional program. It doesn't feel at all regional when we approach it that way. Second question is, these are one-time funds, it's been referred to, so I'm troubled with appropriating them for an ongoing requirement, the eviction prevention. That's an ongoing program. And if we put one-time money into it, we're just pushing the cliff off. And maybe that's a conscious choice, but I have always operated in public funding with the premise that one-time dollars get used for one-time expenditures. So this deviates. And we've talked about that here. We have hewed to that as well.
Thank you, Councilor Nolan. I really appreciate this question because it is complicated. We absolutely want to ensure that we have some capacity to respond to eviction preventions as a part of our homeless services system programming broadly, not just with SHS funding, year over year, because that is an important component of our community's response to the housing crisis broadly. I think the opportunity that we have with eviction prevention programming that we don't have with programs like shelter beds or permanent supportive housing is that you can scale up and scale back eviction prevention responses based on available resources from year to year. Because when you have a shelter bed, you need to operate that shelter bed year over year. And in fact, you need to plan for cost escalations year over year. Whereas with eviction prevention resources, you can make more resources available to respond to increased needs if you have increased need, or less if you have less resource. And what we've seen since the pandemic is increased need and increased resource. And unfortunately, more recently, we've seen decreased resource without a decreasing need in eviction prevention. In fact, we used some SHS one-time funds from our early years, our years 2, 3, and 4 from SHS to augment reductions from ARPA-era funded eviction prevention programming. But we planfully ended that augmentation this last year because we agreed with your reasoning that we needed to ramp down to what was sustainable year over year. Unfortunately, what we didn't foresee is that the state would make such a sudden, significant reduction at the same time to eviction prevention. So what we're trying to do is stabilize the overall investments in eviction prevention, knowing that we're going to have to continue to find that right level of stability based on where the state's going to come in on eviction prevention ongoing and how much should be there from SHS ongoing. And we're asking for this one-time funding to respond to this unplanned need in that longer-term plan for stability and eviction prevention.
Appreciate the response. I don't share the analysis that you have just expressed. If we're sad, and I am joining Councilor Lewis in being sad that the state has stepped back from this, in a way, Washington County has also stepped back from it, because if it's a priority, we think the state should put its hand into its magic money pocket, which it doesn't have, and you've acknowledged that, Councilor Lewis, but we don't seem to have the same expectation of ourselves. And final comment I want to make plays off of something Councilor Lewis raised about population A and population B. Do you know how your ongoing funding is invested, spent between population A and population B, aside from this request?
Thank you for that.
Is it 75-25?
Thank you for that question, Counselor. Well, I understand the way we report on our investments is a look back over the previous year, and staff are currently finalizing that financial report for the October 31st annual report deadline that's coming up. I believe we are approximately at 65-35 in Washington County, which is part of the challenge we're navigating, because we see eviction prevention as a critical component to staving off the inflow of homeless needs and people becoming aging into population A, but we have to right-size our investments. So where we were approximately last year and where I believe we are approximately this year, looking back on last year, is at the 65-35 balance in Pop A, Pop B investments in Washington County.
That surprises me. Thanks. What would this $10 million investment do to that ratio?
So because it is one
Would
time.
it get it closer to 75 or closer to 60?
Thank you, Counselor, for the question. It's a complicated answer because it depends on what we're measuring. So if we're looking at the year-over-year ongoing operations, if we were to continue funding eviction prevention if we were going to increase SHS resources to fund eviction prevention after the next 2 years, which is a possibility, that would increase our proportion of Pop B investments. Generally speaking, the capital investments are proportionately serving populations A and B in Washington County. So those capital investments don't push that balance in any direction.
Have you looked to the other two counties who are partners to ask if there's anything you can do to help them serve population A? Instead of giving them bus tickets to go to Portland, which I appreciate you said you no longer do.
Thank you, Counselor, for the question. I certainly did not mean to suggest we don't have need to serve population A in Washington County.
Then why aren't you spending 75% of your funds on them?
Thank you, Counselor, for the question. Part of the conversation around how we measure our intent around population A and B is with the understanding that it takes time to increase investments in serving population population A, because it takes time to get those chronically households housed. It takes time to build out that capacity to build PSH. And so our systems have generally been increasing our proportionate investment in population A over time. And we fully anticipate that we will meet that intention and that mark as our system matures. And what that will also require is a reduction in investments in population B focused programs in order to increase that capacity in population A investments over time.
Okay. Would that mean then that when we add up the 10 years of this current levy, total 10-year investment will be 75% population A and 25% population B, which means in the last 3 or 4 years, it's going to have to be close to 100% to get that average, to get that math to work.
Thank you, Councilor, for that question. I think this is an important place for the region to come together and further dig into our intentions around population A and B. One challenge that we are observing in Washington County is it'll make it harder for us to invest in critical interventions like eviction prevention over time in order to balance out those early years where we had higher investments in population B. So we think that the ideal scenario here is that we're building a balanced system that is sustainable long-term, and some of our understanding of how to achieve that has evolved since the beginning of this measure, but this is a regional conversation worth having, and I'll pivot over to.
Yeah, I just want to double down on that, Councilor Nolan, too, that in the case of Washington County and Clackamas County, unlike Multnomah County, the building of the infrastructure that is necessary to provide the kind of supports that population A requires, a housing placement, ongoing rent assistance, ongoing case management, is a very different use of the dollar than in eviction prevention, which is one of the best uses of one-time funding because it is a one-time only intervention. So in order to provide that kind of service for population A, which requires a whole host of different interventions, a system must be built up, and that's what Washington County and Clackamas County have been focused on for the last 5 years. So to answer your question, I fully expect in the next 5 years, there will be a rebalancing of that, and I think we're already seeing it with Washington County.
Just for clarity, does that mean that you expect that when we calculate the spending on population A and population B over the 10 years of this bond, of this levy, you expect that collectively these 3 counties will have spent 75% of those funds serving population A? And tell me how you do the arithmetic. If this $10 million ask gets us further away from 75%, that's not trending in the right direction.
That is the original intent of the SHS measure. That is where we're headed. What we do not control is the federal government, and we'll talk about that in the next agenda item and how that externality could really upend our intents and our trajectory. But without those externalities, I would fully expect for us to rebalance our service throughout the region.
I'll yield back, but I think we have to start asking ourselves a lot more probing questions. And I think we have to stop relying in our planning on externalities like state funding and federal funding. And we need to do what we can with this singular in the nation per capita investment in serving people who are homeless or who are on the edge of becoming homeless. It's hard for me to think that we should be complaining about a lack of resources when this region has more resources per capita than any other region in the country.
There are a lot of questions as we move into the second 5 years, I think, based on our experience from the first 5 years. So duly noted. Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to thank Washington County for all the work they've done. I remember the first rent assistance really had to do with a building that was going to go market rate. I had friends that lived there, and the county stepped up and bought the building and kept people. I think what we've realized over the last several years is that, and I'm going to disagree a little bit with Councilor Nolan, we realized that 75-25 was a guess. We didn't realize all the externalities, and we didn't realize all the differences in each county. We had not studied this. It was a good guess. It's a good target, but it doesn't work in each county. Each county has different needs, different resources, and different ways of dealing with things. So I think we should not be playing specifically to the numbers. We should be looking at serving populations and keeping people from being homeless. And that may be more rental assistance in Washington County and less direct services. But the monies that we're supposedly allocating on a one-time basis provide both of those services. One is for rental assistance as well as $6 million. And I had two particular questions. One is, can you identify maybe the top three sort of capital expenditure projects that will use up the $6 million? And then secondly, one of the areas that I'm concerned about, of course, is how much money we have left in case Clackamas County comes in. Some of my district is Clackamas County, and there's also a question of the southern part of Washington County is a little bit underserved. So I guess it's a two-part question. How much money do we have left that we could help the Clackamas if they come up with a reasonable request? And then also, how do we get more services in the southern part of the district, which is both Councilor Lewis's district as well as mine?
Thank you, Councilor Rosenthal. And just for the record, I appreciate your support and championship of our acquisition of Woodspring, and I want to clarify for this council that the resources for that project were not SHS because of the capital restrictions on SHS resources. But yes, we are excited to celebrate the Woodspring acquisition and I think wall breaking or ribbon cutting, not ribbon cutting, but groundbreaking coming up, I think, Thursday. So the capital projects, your first question, which capital projects would these $6 million potentially support? We have 2 transitional housing projects underway that have hit some procedural or cost escalation circumstances that are likely to require their need to ask for additional resources within the scope of their original contract. And we have 2 access centers underway as well in Washington County that are likely to need some of these resources. We're pleased that the access center and permanent shelter that was funded with SHS resources in Tigard is fully open and fully complete. So we don't anticipate any of these one-time requests needed because we already have that infrastructure on the ground in Tigard.
Great.
Thank you. Councilor Gonzalez.
I'm sorry, the second part of the question is, how much resources does that leave us in case we do get a request from Clackamas County, as you mentioned?
Could you repeat your question, please, Councilor Rosenthal?
You mentioned that we anticipate that Clackamas County may file a request, and we've already allocated $25 million. That's right. Or if we approve this, we would have allocated. What sort of resources do we have left in case we respond positively to Clackamas County request?
We're expecting a $7 million ask from Clackamas County, which should leave us around about $3 to $5 million for carryover here at Metro.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Now, Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks. Hey, Jess. Thank you so much for coming. And also, great to see many providers here in the room from Washington County. Molly, thank you for your hard work. I think that the conversation we've had so far, I think, is really important around policy. One of the questions that I have, and I think right now we're having a discussion about and I think it's the wrong discussion, which is which programs are more important than others. And that's very hard to do in the context of the federal funding picture, which we have a federal partner that is completely vacating their role in supporting us, and a state budget that is also under severe stress. And I think there's an important conversation, Jess, as you mentioned, for the region to continue to evaluate and calibrate our approach. I do have a question, however, and this might be more oriented to Liam, because I share some of the concerns that are shared by Councilor Nolan in that this special fund, when the council decided that we wanted to spend our carryover reserves from administrative, this is my recollection. And again, you developed the policy, administrative rules, you've worked with the county to negotiate, was that my recollection is that this would be going priority dollars to accelerating population A and the severe stress that we've seen on our streets is when Mayor Wilson approached us. And there's data points about the hundreds of people that have died in population A because of lack of shelter, lack of the support and the services in the region. And That was my sense of the money that we were putting forward. I understand that since that initial conversation, the parameters of the world have changed significantly. So I don't want to be fully ingrained into that initial policy conversation. But to what Councilor Nolan mentioned around the Pop A versus Pop B kind of general category of that, it does feel like it's incongruent with the initial conversation that we had. So my question to Liam is, how did Metro approach that? Obviously, there's been a lot of work in the request coming to us to consideration. $10 million is a significant number in terms of the initial spirit of the council conversation, the grant program. And then I guess I'll have a comment after I hear from you.
You got it, Councilor Gonzalez. I'm actually going to ask Kristen Dennis to take a seat to help me answer this question. So I'll answer from my perspective, my experience. I know there was a lot of discussion with the City of Portland at the time too. I know that the way in which we approached this carryover and the way in which we wanted to distribute this funding was initially precipitated by Mayor Wilson's ask. And that was very specific to the homelessness needs in the City of Portland itself. I don't recall there being anything specific about Population A in the original resolution back in April, but rather this was responsive to one-time only needs as determined by those jurisdictions. And that's been my experience, but again, I wasn't part of the political conversations that perhaps Kristen Dennis, Chief of Staff to Council, was.
Thank you, Liam. Again, for the record, my name is Kristen Dennis, age, she, her pronouns. I'm Chief of Staff to the Metro Council. And just following up on what Liam said, the focus that we had in that original resolution, and certainly the instructions that we gave and the conversations we had with our county partners, has been that the emphasis should be on one-time use only, that we do not expect Metro to have this type of carryover in the future. And that is the challenge. Certainly, we've been clear in a lot of our conversations, and we know the counties have been trying to prioritize Population A as well. But as I think Jess talked about earlier, the challenge is matching up one-time funds with those kind of ongoing needs that we see, particularly for Population A. But we certainly, I think the emphasis for us was this has to be one-time, so that really narrowed what the counties could use these funds for.
Okay, thank you both for that. And that actually helps me interpret the recommendation a lot better. Because I remember the policy conversations, the work sessions we had, and obviously you've been implementing to that. So I'm glad that we built in some of that flexibility for our county partners. I will be gladly supporting this request to support investments in the county I represent. And I do have one final question, which I think we've all the counselors that have spoken so far have alluded to, which is the 75-25 split. And I know Councilor Rosenthal mentioned it feeling like a guess. I mean, as one of the counselors that was active in those conversations, I don't think it was a guess. I think it was an intentional policy choice for us to communicate to voters around what our priorities were. So I want to be clear about that. And I know we just executed a data sharing agreement, and that we have so much more information to be able to work through there. But I guess I share this concern around by 2030, will each of the counties be at 75-25 as we talked with voters? That is just an ongoing thing that I think about, and having not had the opportunity to see the full data, the reports, our reports haven't been necessarily framed in that way. Partners having different definitions that I know that we're working to streamline. I just want to vocalize that and continue to kind of put that at the front of our agenda. I think especially as we talk about potential extension and a potential referral, to me that is like absolutely, I want to be certain when I'm talking to voters and constituents that we did right by what we said we were going to do. I think everyone here agrees on that. And whatever information, partnership, program design, investment that the Metro Council can make, I wish that we had more money to be able to support, is going to be very, very top of mind for me going forward. Stepping off of that high horse, again, I will be supporting this resolution, and Thank you for your hard work and thank for listening to my feedback and requests on policy, and hopefully staff too. I think that population A question is one of the political things that we're really struggling to tell the story on, and that the voters are holding our feet to the fire the most on.
Councilor Gonzalez, if I might, Metro Council has been very consistent, you in particular have been very consistent about wanting to make sure that we are adhering to that population A, population B breakdown. One of the considerations for staff has been wanting to make sure, and making this one-time money available, has been to make sure that our county partners have the flexibility to continue to put their ongoing dollars toward these ongoing needs, which again gets to the root of the how to best serve population A. And again, focusing on the one-time nature of these. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. There are certainly some themes, but I think we are ready to call for, oh, do we have another? Councilor Nolan, before we go to a vote.
Putting an exclamation point on it. We have heard back and forth good intent. So my question, I'm going to amend my question to you, Liam, and address it to Marisa as well. Can we get a commitment from our staff that going forward, every proposal they bring us on SHS will get us closer to a 75-25 split and not further away? That you will use that as a screening tool, because I'm hearing you say you take us seriously. So how does that turn into action?
Because I would look to council. If that is council's direction, we will take that we will follow that direction.
I think what I'd like to put on the table is to separate these two issues. We have something before us now, and maybe bring back that for a policy discussion for a workshop to make sure that we're all on the same page, because we've had conversation directed at staff here, but we haven't had a conversation of the council to be able to move it in that direction. Thank you, Marisa. So can we get that scheduled for a work session coming up, just to figure out how to move forward on that conversation? Okay. Got nodding heads. All right, thank you. Councilor Wong.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm not sure if I should save some of my commentary for, if there is.
Now or after a motion, that's fine.
Okay. Gosh, I've struggled with this one a little bit, to be honest. And at the end of the day, I do support this. I believe counties know what's best for the communities they serve. I just struggle with, this pot of one-time dollars that we carry over. And I really want to see a regional system. I think that we all share that goal. And it breaks my heart to know that, there might not be eviction prevention for folks that live on the wrong side of the street because, they're not in Washington County. But at the same time, I think those folks that you are going to be able to help, that's massive and so well needed. So I don't think that we used our admin dollars carryover in a way that creates regional investments. So I think going forward, as we think about the new system, weapon extension potentially or whatnot, that's really a real value that we have. Is like how do we create that system where everyone can be served? So yeah, I will. I'll be
if we can hold the conversation
supporting this measure, but with the caveat that that discussion around partnership and what that looks like and how we create that system that we all want is front and center. Should new resources become available. I also do want to put a point on the 75-25 split. For me, I really care about the outcomes that our community sees. So I know the 75-25 split was, created, and that's like a good benchmark, but I don't think it's a hard and fast rule if we can deliver, the impact and success that our community deserves. And I understand, and given the numbers, prevention or eviction prevention is effective and prevents people from becoming population A, and that's worthy and worthwhile of investment. So I'm not married to that 75-25 split. What I want to see is outcomes, in the community. So yeah, I think I'll just leave it. I think that's worth, further conversation, but like, we kind of set that arbitrarily and times have changed. So what does success look like now? And it's not that, we don't care about population A, but like, again, prevention is the most cost-effective intervention. So, thank you.
Thank you, Council. Before I call for a vote, I just want to say we've got a really good conversation coming up after this that I think relates right back into the regionalization of the system and where we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. And that is that we have had very limited key performance metrics. And part of what we're going to be talking about is what are we actually trying to aim for in this next 5 years, and how do we put that together with a team of interested folks, both in changing our governance structure and input from those on the ground. So I'm looking forward to that conversation next. And yet we are always seeming to respond in an emergency in this setting with SHS, because things have been moving so quickly between COVID and ramping up of resources, and then a drawing down of resources, and then we get a bump here and we get a bump there. I agree, outcomes are more important. I think striving towards what we said we would do to the voters, and an asterisk that will need to be backed up with a lot of information of why, if it's not on target, right? But as far as I'm concerned, this is a good proposal, and I will call for a motion on resolution number 25-5539.
President Peterson, Councilor Gonzalez moves approval of the resolution.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Councilor Rosenthal seconds.
It's been moved by Councilor Gonzalez and seconded by Councilor Rosenthal. Is there any additional discussion, Councilor? Yes.
I think through this process, Washington County was following guidance that Metro staff gave it in preparing this proposal and request. Therefore, I don't think it is appropriate to change that after, if they were following in good faith, a number we gave them. I suspect we gave them the $10 million number because we were stuck with a truly fabricated, made-up number of distribution of funds that our financial wizards now tell us we can't prove or disprove. So I'm going to vote for this resolution, but I really am looking forward to the conversation we'll have later, but I would like it to be sooner rather than later. And I'm going to join Councilor Gonzalez in pushing for Metro to make good on what it told the voters we would do. Whether we as a different council would change that, I don't think is the question. It's, can the voters trust us to deliver what we said we'd deliver?
Thank you. Georgia, will you please call the roll? Councilor Gonzalez.
Sorry, again, I want to.
Don't call the roll.
Thank you. Not yet, Georgia. We will get there. I just want to respond to the comment because, as one of the Metro councilors that was here in 2020 when we were designing it, the 75-25 and the split, they were not fabricated or arbitrary. They are based in studies that the four partners agreed to. The formula of distribution, we can't measure all of it because of the corporate income tax, but the personal income tax we can measure, and that is the way the formula was designed, based off of that formula. That's my understanding of that. And so I just want it on the record for all the people watching at home and on YouTube, this exciting discussion that it was not fabricated. Is the number the right number going forward? That is a conversation for policy that we can all have, but for the sake of our policy, I mean, we did our homework, we agreed on it, and it is not a fabricated number. So I just wanted to share that just because I want to make sure that's on the record as we're talking about this.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Rosenthal?
Yeah, I think a little further discussion is necessary. I think our promise to the voters was to try and make homelessness rare, occasional, and short-lived. I don't think our promise was so much to specific numbers. And I agree with Councilor Gonzalez. It was a policy statement, but it was a policy statement we probably should have said approximately, because we didn't have the staff, or in fact, all the data. We had one-time counts, which were somewhat suspect. So is it 75% plus or minus 0.1%, plus or minus 1%, plus or minus 3%, plus or minus 5%? The number, it wasn't, we said a specific number, but those numbers didn't have qualifiers at the time. So I think we have to take that into consideration. Are we working in the direction of making homelessness rare, short-term, or non-continuing? I forget the exact term. So I think that's the promise to the voters, and I think we are making progress.
Thank you, Council. And again, just for the record, we will find a time to have a full discussion, which I think is necessary. But right now, we're voting on the proposal before us. Georgia, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Counselor Lewis?
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez?
Aye.
Counselor Simpson?
Aye.
Counselor Wong?
Aye.
Counselor Rosenthal?
Aye.
Counselor Nolan?
Yes.
Council President Peterson?
Aye, the motion passes. Thank you. Thank you for everybody who showed up today. You show up every day and do an amazing amount of work, and we appreciate bringing this forward and dealing with some rather looming issues and being proactive about it. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to our next round of business, which is a supported housing services reform update. We will move, we've got both Liam and Yesenia are coming up to talk to us about the next steps with the consideration of reforms later than this year. I will note that a considerable amount of work has gone into the proposals that they are about to share with you, both from the President's work group, that was the start of the conversation, and conversations with a lot of other folks and council. So this is not the first time that we have heard or seen this, but this is a conversation to move us to the next steps so that we can get through a lot of this work that needs to be done this fall and done by the end of the year would be my hope. Cross your fingers.
We're all crossing our fingers.
So I will turn it over to Liam. Thank you.
All right, thank you. For the record again, my name is Liam Frost. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm the Interim Director of Housing and Cure at Metro, and you all thought I was walking out, didn't you? But you got to hydrate, everybody. Do not forget your water. Yesenia Delgado, the SHS Division Director, is here with me today to kick off a series of 4 council meetings on the topic of potential changes to the Supportive Housing Services Initiative that we believe are responsive to a wealth of feedback from leaders and community members throughout the region, and that we also believe are necessary to build critical improvements into the system. We are returning to council after 18 months of engagement with community leaders, advocates, business representatives, elected officials from all over the region. And people leaned all the way in during the last year and a half. The consensus from most folks is that the need for homeless services remains overwhelming and that the need will continue well into the future. And we also collectively need to make improvements to the system. Fortunately for us, participants in these processes were not reluctant to share their feedback and ideas. The last engagement process, the Metro Council President's Work Group, concluded in June, and myself, Kristen Dennis, and Director of Government Affairs, Andy Shaw, submitted to you all a memo committing to you that we would be back in the fall to prepare a work plan for necessary changes to SHS. Well, now it's the fall, and here we are. Perhaps just as important in terms of timing, we are halfway through the 10-year lifespan of the SHS initiative, and we're obligated to look back, learn from our lessons of what has worked and what hasn't worked so well. So today's presentation is designed to set the stage for council so that we will be ready to discuss potential reforms on October 30th. In this presentation today, you'll hear from me and Yesenia about the progress we've made, the lessons we have learned, what we've heard from our engagement processes, and also the new funding landscape we're about to enter as a regional homelessness services system. We're not going to paint you a rosy picture, nor are we going to dwell on the things that haven't been as successful, but we need to be clear-eyed on both if we are to make the right improvements to this regional system. Yesenia is going to take it from here on slide 3. I think we're going to skip the first 2. Sorry, Anne, I should have teed you up there. And Yesenia is going to kick us off by talking about what it was like to build a new regional system of care where none existed previously. Thank you.
There we go. And good morning, President Peterson and Metro Council. For the record, I'm Yesenia Delgado. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the SHS Division Director here. The houselessness crisis is deeply impactful to communities across our region because a safe and stable home is part of a person's fundamental needs. The SHS measure was referred to voters in February 2020 before the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated systemic fractures and inequities. The SHS measure was passed during a critical time to build a regional homeless system of care. And as someone who had been doing this work for years, I still remember the day the measure passed and feeling hope in the middle of a pandemic and societal unrest. I felt hope that we might be able to find regional solutions to this regional housing problem that we had. The passing of the ballot measure then catalyzed the creation of systems and structures for us to build a regional homeless system of care. We entered into intergovernmental agreements with Multnomah, Washington, Clackamas County that further memorialize agreements and understandings for how our partnership would work. They also created local implementation plans that reflected their local needs, and that was in conjunction with their own elected officials and Board of Commissioners. We also then created the Metro SHS Work Plan, which was a governance document for how the revenues for SHS would be distributed, implemented, and what the different parameters for how these funds would be used. And it also included goals and metrics. Since the inception of SHS, Metro's role as a funder has been to lead, convene, and support with systems integration to build the homeless regional system of care while providing oversight and accountability to the SHS fund. And as part of those responsibilities, we set up the SHS Oversight Committee to provide oversight and accountability on behalf of the Metro Council. We also set up the Tri-County Planning Body, whose main charge is to create a regional plan for how we address homelessness regionally here in the metro area. The Metro Housing Department has also worked closely with county partners to implement other oversight administrative functions like reporting structures. So now we have quarterly, annual, and other reporting structures that allow us information on how things are progressing throughout the year. We also have definitions and standards that we have applied across the region to ensure that there's congruency in service delivery and application of that. We've also, as part of our role, have conducted monitoring and evaluation. So this is both to assess for compliance and effectiveness of the core SHS funded programming that we fund. And we've instituted a data sharing agreement to have access to raw and disaggregated data to be able to validate, monitor, and then report out to the broader public progress that we're making with SHS. And if we go to the next slide, all of this building that I just referenced for the last 4.5 years has really led to some meaningful accomplishments that you see here on this slide. We have worked to build a regional homeless system of care to address homelessness with the urgency and efficacy it demands. Two of the central goals in the Metro SHS work plan that we talk a lot are the 5,000 and 10,000 goals. So we have a goal to connect at least 5,000 households experiencing homelessness to permanent supportive housing. And through year 4, so June 2025, we have placed 4,844 households into permanent supportive housing. So these are households with higher levels of acuity that get that longer term rent subsidy along with those wraparound services to ensure that they stay housed. So with that number, we are well on our way this year to surpass that goal that we placed of connecting 5,000 households in the region to permanent supportive housing. There is also a goal to stabilize at least 10,000 households at risk or experiencing homelessness into permanent supportive housing. And again, through June 2025, which is where we have the latest data, is that we have served over 22,000 people in either homeless prevention services, so supporting households and staying housed, or in rapid rehousing services, so like providing households that maybe don't have as high level of acuities into housing placement programs that support the needs that they have to stay housed. So we have well surpassed that initial goal that we set at the onset of the measure to support those 10,000 households. So halfway through the measure, this progress that we've made is a huge part due to our county partners and also all the service providers that are doing really incredible work on the ground. Additionally, some other key accomplishments include that the regional plans and goals have been finalized. We have convened an accelerated system integration across the healthcare, training, and other systems. The regional plan that then compiles all of these goals and plans along with metrics and outcomes is just a few steps away from being finalized, and then we will be bringing that to you all as well. This plan will really provide us as a region a roadmap on where we should focus our regional efforts and investments. Another highlight here is some of the regional reporting alignment. I know that in the previous agenda item, there's a lot of conversation around population A and B, the 75-25 split. And though I understand that perhaps in the past we haven't had a lot of the data or reporting needed to see how well we're doing in that, I feel really confident that with the work that we spent this last year doing with the Oversight Committee and county partners, we will finally be able to paint a really good story of where we're at in that process. And that is coming up with the annual reports that are due on October 31st. Historically, the homeless system hasn't been really good at being able to integrate both financial reporting and program reporting, which is really what took some time here to build out. But like I said, I feel like we've created really great tools and systems, and I'm really looking forward to coming back later this fall and winter to speak more on those annual reports and also recommendations that the Oversight Committee might have on population A and B and that financial split and where we head from here. Additionally, we've also had really great success integrating both the SHS measure and the affordable housing bond here at Metro. The opportunity to align SHS-funded services and rent assistance with bond-funded capital investments significantly expanded the region's ability to develop permanent supportive housing for people experiencing prolonged homelessness. Across the 3 counties, SHS-funded supportive services and rent assistance have been integrated with bond-funded capital investments to create over 350 permanent supportive housing units across the region. So that really speaks to the integration work that we were able to do there with both of these bonds. And if we go to the next slide, we do talk a lot about the 5,000 and 10,000 goal, and we are always talking about our progress towards that. But there are additional SHS goals as part of the Metro SHS work plan. There are goals in the work plan around housing stability, equitable service delivery, and engagement and decision making. In the housing stability goals, that is where we're tracking key performance indicators like retention rates, returns to homelessness, length of homelessness, and other key performance indicators. And these key performance indicators really require longer periods of time to be able to assess accurate progress and where we're at towards meeting them. So as folks might see here, in the 3rd SHS Oversight Committee regional report was the first time that we have ever had enough information to be able to report out on these additional goals. The example that you see here is a goal under the housing stabilization section, which is that housing equity is advanced by providing access to services and housing for Black, Indigenous, and people of color at greater rates than Black, Indigenous, and people of color are experiencing homelessness. So this was a core goal that came out of the plan. And on this slide here, you see the data on point in time count, which is a local homelessness census count on any given night, showing the number of people of color experiencing homelessness. In the green bar, and then the blue bar, you see the housing placements and preventions by people of color and non-Hispanic white. So halfway through the measure is also a pivotal time to review these additional goals and regional outcome metrics that we had in the Metro SHS work plan, see what progress we've made towards them, and then also be able to provide guidance and direction on how we want to move forward with these goals and regional outcome metrics. And if we go to the next slide, this slide here really just shows the progress that we've made in this last year's of SHS-funded programming. So I think what's really exciting about this slide is that in the 4th year, it was the first time ever that we as a region really exceeded all of all of our goals that we had in the main areas funded by SHS. I think it really shows that we are building a system that we can rely on and be able to like create new placements while sustaining households. And it really shows that we are building towards and understanding our capacity in a really unique way. Yeah, and if we go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so we have accomplished a lot in the last 4.5 years, but it hasn't been an easy process to stand up a regional system that did not exist prior to 2020. The SHS program has experienced challenges, and we have learned some lessons along the way. And unpacking these lessons is critical as we strive to refine and improve the system to ensure better outcomes for people experiencing homelessness. Some of those lessons learned and key opportunities for us to take a look at and unpack more are that the key responsibilities between counties, Metro, have at times been unclear, and although we've made really great progress, there still remains more work to be done there. We've also received feedback from interested parties that the dual committee structure could, use some work and refinement there. It's a multi-layer governance structure between both the Oversight Committee and the Tri-County Planning Body that includes overlapping and ambiguous responsibilities with limited enforcement and accountability mechanisms. The oversight and regional policy duties are split between these two committees, which at time has resulted in inefficient processes, resulted in delayed implementation. So there's a real need here to look at how we clarify and streamline oversight and policy for this program. Another opportunity that we have is to be clear about Metro's role as a funder to provide greater clarity for our partners. The first few years of SHS were all about building the system, as I just discussed, but as we pivot into this next season of SHS, it is critical that we are clear about Metro's role and how we add value to the system while we continue to conduct oversight and accountability for this program. Another lesson learned has been with the intergovernmental agreements. These agreements provide a high-level structure, but at times lack the specificity needed for effective execution and implementation of the program. There was a lot that we could not anticipate in 2020 when we were drafting these agreements. For example, the agreements don't necessarily have a clear process for how it is that Metro releases guidance. So that's something that we have to work through and figure out with our county partners. So there's just information there that we could have more specifics and details around in our IGAs. And finally, the last lesson learned that you see here is around the Regional Investment Fund and the regional plan. The urgency to implement the measure amid a global pandemic resulted in regional strategies and local implementation plans that aren't officially synchronized. Additionally, the Tri-County Planning Body has provided feedback on needing additional tracking and oversight of the Regional Investment Fund. And as a reminder, this is a fund that we're able to access for regional investments. And they're just needing they provided some additional feedback on how we could strengthen how we are tracking investments, but also how we are making decisions for those investments. So yeah, I hope this information has been helpful in terms of grounding us and where we have been, where we are now. And I'm going to pass it over to Liam to talk a little bit more about where we're headed with some of these reform concepts.
Thanks so much, Yesenia. And if we can go to the next slide, please. This slide covers that engagement work I referenced at the beginning of this presentation, and it really all kicked off when Chief Operating Officer Madrigal initiated the Stakeholder Advisory Group, table, I should get that right by now, Marisa, over the course of about a 5-6 month period that engaged a number of folks across not just the homeless services sector, but elected officials and the housing development, affordable housing development sector too. Marisa then submitted her recommendation to council that July. We continued focused engagement with different coalitions and community leadership over the next few months. We came back to you all with a resolution at that point, and you took action to give more direction. President Peterson then initiated the Metro Council President Work Group, again bringing together a wide array of different voices from around the region to weigh in on improvements to the SHS system, but really focused on a vision, a North Star, new goals and KPIs. And we've been collecting all that data all along. In addition to that, you'll see underneath all of those engagements, we've had the ongoing work of the SHS Oversight Committee and the Tri-County Planning Body. I want to say thanks to Councillor Lewis for her participation on both of those committees and keeping that Metro Council connection clear and strong. But those committees were offering all sorts of suggestions from very early on. They've identified some of the lessons learned that Yesenia was reflecting back to you just now, and really sing in concert with a lot of the feedback we've gotten from the engagement. And speaking of which, the next two slides, we're just listing off some of the organizations and agencies represented in these engagements over the last 18 months. So if we can go to the next slide, please. We really just wanted to cram in as many as we could to demonstrate to you just how many organizations have been involved and have weighed in on some of these areas and have provided different input. Next slide again, please. Again, just another list of folks that have been engaged at various points, also including the Oversight Committee and the Tri-County Planning Body too. All right, that was just for demonstrative purposes. Next slide, please. So if we could boil all of the feedback that we've gotten in the hours and hours that we spent with folks into really consistent themes, it would be the following four, and that is having a more focused, clear regional alignment. And given the discussion we just had in the previous agenda item, especially from you, Councillor Wong, I think it's clear that Council has an appetite for more regional consistency and clarity. And it's not just you all, we heard that from our partners across the region too. No surprise on the second point around governance, accountability, and streamlined decision-making. There's not a minority report on this one. I think this is a unanimous support for making improvements in this area. Yesenia presented some of the goals that were approved on by Council in the 2020 SHS work plan earlier and some of the key performance indicators. Now that we're halfway through the measure, we're close to fulfilling those high-level regional goals. It really is incumbent upon Metro, and especially you as Metro Council, to initiate additional key performance indicators and perhaps some new goals going into the next 5 years. And that's what we plan to engage with you on in the next few work sessions. And then the last one, again, and it kind of comes back to Councillor Nolan and Councillor Rosenthal and Councillor Gonzalez's points in the last agenda item, which is getting that transparency around where the money's been spent, on the outcomes that you're looking to see, and on which populations that money is being spent. And so we'll be making a proposal to you in this work plan that we'll be bringing back to provide that kind of transparency and that kind of analysis that anyone can do on their own. You don't have to be a Metro councillor to do that, but no spoiler alerts here. Next slide, please. So again, the work plan that we want to bring back to you, as we promised in that memo I mentioned, in the next 6 weeks, will include some of the areas. But I want to be clear that the principles with which we are going about this work plan are how can we create a system that's more efficient, more streamlined, and more transparent. And so you'll see the list of those reform areas that reflect back the commitments we made to you in that memo. I won't read them out because nobody likes people reading from a slide, but you can read them yourself. I think you may recall some of these areas as you read them in the memo from a while back. Next slide, please. And I'm going to hand it over to Yesenia, but I do want to make a point that we've not been resting on our laurels as the Metro Department, Housing Department staff. I'm really proud of the work that our staff have been engaged in over the last 18 months and more than that since we became a department. And while you always don't always get the updates around the work that we're doing, it's important to us to be able to share that with you when we can. And we wanted to take a moment to just provide some updates to show that we are being responsive to some of the feedback that we've gotten along the way and getting a head start. So sorry to steal your thunder a little bit, but go ahead.
All good. Yeah, so we wanted to touch on a few more opportunities for engagement that we will be connecting with you all via further work sessions, two-on-one briefs. So these areas of work are not formally part of the reforms package and concepts that we'll be discussing in future work sessions, but I do think that the information and work happening in these areas helps inform decisions that Metro Council is making. So as you are aware, Council President Peterson convened and co-led a work of elected a group of elected and coalition leaders and important discussions about the future of SHS and the President's work group. Among the priorities voiced by these leaders was a thorough independent evaluation of SHS implementation that rose as a critical step in restoring trust between partners and the community. Since June, we've been working with a consultant to create a regional systems mapping exercise. So we've been interviewing local leaders, including county elected staff and program leaders, mayors, and nonprofit leaders have also been doing some engagement with you all. And we have really compiled all that information into a scope. And in this next process, we will, our consultant is now performing the actual evaluation, and that includes reviewing and analyzing system data, reporting, and talking with a lot of people from all different angles of the system. People who have experienced homelessness, people who have worked close to the ground, and system leaders. And our plan would be to return at some point next spring to present to you the findings of this SHS system evaluation. This broad effort will then help lay an important groundwork as we're implementing the SHS program evaluation framework that we're partnering with PSU's Homeless Research and Action Collaborative on. This framework will be kind of a grounding in how we conduct ongoing program evaluation. And once the framework is finalized, which we're expecting at some point in December of this year, we'll have an improved foundation for evaluating the performance and effectiveness of specific programs each year and supporting our partners in making ongoing improvements based on that evaluation. We'll also continue to collect and report out data and provide that to you all. Data collection and reporting plays multiple roles. It helps us understand what's happening with taxpayer dollars, and then also supports communicating that back to the public. And ideally, it also helps us understand what is working and what we should direct our resources to, and maybe where we might need to change our approach. So that will also be information that we will be providing you all. Another essential element of achieving a more responsive, transparent, and compliant system is ongoing monitoring. That means that funding allowable services in accordance with our agreements, plans, and requirements that we've set forth in our governance documents. So I'm really happy to report out that we've concluded our negotiations with all three of our county partners and have come up with agreements for what we'll be monitoring this year and are starting to conduct those. We are happy to provide that information to you all in terms of what we're finding, how things went, and what additional opportunities there are there. And finally, this fall/winter, you will also be hearing more from the SHS Oversight Committee and the Tri-County Planning Body. The Tri-County Planning Body is finalizing the regional plan that includes a sort of transmittal letter that has some recommendations and considerations as we think through this next season of SHS and some of the refinement that we would want to do with the regionalization work that's happening. The Oversight Committee will also draft their regional report that will also include some recommendations for how we strengthen oversight. And spoiler alert, I will just say that they have been really interested, similar to you all as Metro Council, in population A and B and that 75-25 split. They're really diving into that a lot deeper this year, and I'm assuming that a lot of the analysis and recommendations could be around that 75-25 split.
Thanks again. If we can move to the next slide, please. We only have 2 slides left, just to reassure you. But I am going to spend a little bit of time on this slide, so bear with me a second. And I want to go into this kind of new phase that we're all in. I know we gave you all briefings last week, but I want to be able to make sure that we're all on the same page here. Because if enacted as proposed, the range of funding changes and reductions we've seen being discussed at the federal level promises to have both widespread as well as deep impacts to our region. It's difficult to comprehensively and accurately characterize all the ramifications because of the sheer number of appropriations and programmatic policies that are being impacted and the many different paths that federal funding takes as it flows to the region. What we do know is that our success in addressing homelessness and housing instability is closely tied with the degree to which the federal government remains a partner in this work. Both SHS and our affordable housing bond were intended to leverage and supplement a multitude of federal funding programs, including those that flow through state agencies, those that flow to our local jurisdictional partners, and those that flow directly to organizations. I cannot underscore this enough. With significantly reduced funding, not only for HUD funding programs, but across the federal landscape, to say nothing of the changes we're seeing to eligibility, allowable uses, and other aspects of the funds, we will see a critical worsening of the conditions that drive homelessness in our region. I just want to provide an example of one of the core funding areas called Continuum of Care. Perhaps some of the clearest, most direct impacts we'll see will be the proposed changes reported by Politico late last month to HUD's Continuum of Care program come to fruition. The Continuum of Care funds are the backbone of homelessness systems in the metro region and really across the country. Among proposed changes would be a sizable cut to permanent housing programs, which includes permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing, taking available funding for those programs at the national level from $3.3 billion to $1.1 billion. In addition to that two-thirds cut, the shift would also reportedly cap investments to those permanent housing programs to 30% of the Continuum of Care's overall funding. Just for the record, our three counties are hovering between, I think one county uses 64% of its COC funding for housing, the other two are hovering around 90%. That's a significant reduction. Some estimates so far are calculating up to about 1,000 folks or 1,000 households at risk from losing their housing for Continuum of Care. We're talking folks who are in IDD programs, DV survivors, and so on. These types of shifts would have a direct impact on SHS-funded partners and programs. COC funding doesn't just pay for the rental assistance and supportive services for these programs, but also helps with planning, administration, and HMIS for the overall system. Then there's the broader funding, emergency solutions grants, community services block grants, home funds, housing choice vouchers, and SNAP. At a time of really high food insecurity, perhaps the highest that Oregon has seen, the new changes to SNAP are about to go into implementation November 1st. There remains a lot of uncertainty. Proposed or enacted cuts, pending litigation, active analysis of impacts, but we're doing our best with our partners to grapple with this on a regional level. We're fortunate to have Melissa Arnold in our shop who's conducting this analysis right now for us, and we're hoping to have some estimates for you in the coming few weeks. I offer this as necessary context because we all know this work of improving SHS and communicating with partners and the public will have to consider the conditions we're working in and respond to the opportunities we have before us. We're not operating in the world of abundance we thought we were just a couple of years ago, but rather we're entering a world of significant scarcity. That said, the work of reforming the SHS system feels to me now more important than ever if we are to make, and I mean including you all as Metro Council, some really difficult decisions about prioritizing the funding, then we need to have clarity of role, clarity of governance, and we need to be able to streamline decision making. So it doesn't set us off track on the reforms at all. It actually reinforces the need to take these reforms. With that, we'll go to the next slide and talk about what's coming up for you. Pretty easy timeline to follow here. So right now, we're on October 14th, setting the table for you. We'll be returning in about 2.5 weeks to do part one. A week later to do part two on the reforms, where we'll discuss that work plan. Our hope is that we will present a work plan that is amenable to this council to be approved on November 20th. So with that, we'll go to the last slide and we are done with our presentation for today. Thank you very much.
Councilors, observations, suggestions? Councilor Rosenthal, then Gonzalez.
I think it's a good summary, and I look forward to the future briefings. One question, do we have any idea right now the relative impact of, say, SNAP and Medicaid reductions on the people who are fragile, homed fragile versus the chronically homeless population? In other words, where is that likely to hit? My understanding is that's probably going to start having a significant trickle impact the first and second quarters of next year?
It's really difficult to quantify, to be honest, Councillor Rosenthal, but what we do know, speaking to your question, well, that will be population B. Those are folks who are on the edge. Those are folks who are dependent upon supplemental income, supplemental resources to remain stable in our community.
If their Medicaid payments go double, they may have trouble paying their rent.
Or if they lose their Medicaid, if their Medicaid access to Medicaid becomes really burdensome and full of obstacles for folks who are suffering from perhaps schizophrenia or other challenges for mental health, then that's going to be really difficult to make those appointments on time, fill out the new paperwork. Those are the folks who are going to be on the edge who are going to get hit the first.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Gonzalez?
Thanks, Liam, for delivering important messages. I shared this, I think, last week when we had the opportunity to hear from our state affairs team also on the impact to Oregon and the federal cuts. And I mean, I just want to be on record to say this administration is doing some like gnarly work, borderline evil work against poor people. And I mean, if you're hungry, too bad. If you don't have shelter, too bad. If you want to ride a bus, too bad. I'm shocked that this is where our country's heading. I'm sorry to make this a pitch for like non-metro issues, but it's just shocking. And then the richest of the rich, are just having a great year, I guess we could say. So I'm appalled at that, and I think that us up here, our community partners, need to do a much better job at communicating to everyday folks the consequences of what we're going to be experiencing. And I can't speak that enough. I think that we just need to be much better at storytelling and why these programs are important, because I think people all over the country are losing faith. Anyway, that's off my soapbox again. With regards to the presentation on reforms and SHS, I think you're super right. I mean, how lucky are we to have SHS in this time? I mean, imagine how horrible things would be if we did not at least have this local tool, given the vacuum that will be created. And unfortunately, we're going to have very hard conversations and decisions, of which I hope that the council has really important engagement with the people on the ground doing the work to help us make those decisions. One of the items that you presented on that I have a lot of interest in is the Regional Investment Fund. From my time and perspective, I think there's just been like a matter of who's on first. Mm-hmm. And when there are so many priorities with so much money that we're trying to do all the things, the riff can sometimes feel like who's taking the lead on that. And so I know that there are a lot of things that are mandated within the IGA in terms of how those are developed, but that specific investment for the TCPB, for the things that we could be doing to kind of look at the more long-range improvements of the regional system, I'm hoping that we can find some opportunities to collaborate on a government-to-government level on getting that work forward. I know you and I have talked about that, but specifically from the presentation you made, the RIF to me is something that I think I would like for Metro to have more leadership in, just to be frank, and for us to figure that out. And I'm looking forward to additional conversations around our oversight structures and what those look like. I know there's some proposals on the table that we'll have further conversation in these next few weeks, but thanks for listening, and no specific questions, but those are my comments as I'll be looking at this policy going forward.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Councilor Huang and then Lewis.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Councilor Gonzalez, for painting such a rosy picture of the future coming up.
Sorry, boss.
But given obvious these headwinds, I'm really concerned, obviously, about kind of the new normal that we're approaching, and I want us to be really thoughtful as we plan out kind of like the intermediate term, short to intermediate term, about how do we empower that process to really think about what a resilient regional system will look like for decades to come. And I think that's kind of the big conversation that we as a region need to have. We saw today that the state pulled back from eviction prevention and, all the cuts coming to HUD and healthcare that supports the system. So given that, like, how do we structure, the new system that we have to meet local needs, and what does that look like? And we have two real levers at Metro, right? We have SHS, and we have an affordable housing bond that we've spent out, and those are interlinked processes. So I'm wondering, I don't think we can actually have just an SHS conversation and just a housing conversation. I think we actually need to meld them together because they're so critically interlinked. So yeah, I'm just kind of would love your thoughts on, like, how do we use this process to have that broader conversation for both kind of our levers, because, if we have a new housing bond, the production depends on SHS, right, in some way. So what would that process look like? You probably don't have the answers today, but, what should we be thinking about, and how do we structure things so that we don't have this 2030 deadline, hanging over us, so we don't have federal cuts we'll see next year?
I have some brief thoughts for you, Councilor Wong, because I know everybody wants to get to lunch. What we have learned is being able to work with our planning department partners, being able to work with our jurisdictional partners, and figuring out where the sweet spots that SHS can work with the housing bond. The housing bond came before SHS. And so they went first in terms of creating IGAs with their jurisdictional partners. But we've seen areas in which, Sandy touched on it earlier, where SHS and the affordable housing bond has created a synergy. And I think that's what we can bring next. It's hard for me to answer that question because it really is a political question around, the sequencing of these events and the sequencing of these plans. What I can tell you, Councillor, is that we will be ready to work together on both those things when the time comes. And we will find ways to do that as we get there. Again, we're not resting on our laurels. We're always trying to find opportunity to be more than the sum of our parts.
I think we're at the point where we have to have that conversation, right? Like, there is no other option. So, like, my ask would just be, how do we set that table to have the most productive conversation possible? I know we're gonna be, like, changing up advisory committees and things like that, but I think the overarching goal is, like, we need that efficient, transparent, and effective regional system. And we can't all go our own ways because the dollars don't support that anymore.
Thank you.
Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I really appreciate that when you frame this conversation, you focus on people who every day in this region are waking up cold and wet and without a sense of where they're going to go to sleep tonight. And the work is done on an individual level. So you do center people, which is hard to do when you look at what we said we were going to do. We were going to serve X number of people, households, and we were going to divide money up so that we were focusing on chronically homeless people. That's a counting exercise, not an impact exercise. And I think that the exercise that's in front of us is a path of focusing in on how we want to build a system so that with or without these resources, we know how to prioritize as a region. We know how to best spend the next dollar across the region. And we are working towards understanding here at Metro that we are but one part. And up until this moment, we have looked at our resources in context of other resources that the county spends. And in some places, we've been kind of a co-equal to federal government, state government, philanthropic investment. And in some areas, we're greater than those expenditures. But now with the landscape shifting significantly, we can't rely on those previous assumptions. Federal government has really not ever been there. State government is taking a big step back. And I see philanthropy and individuals stepping up in bigger ways. Clackamas County on Friday night, I was at a fundraiser. I've never seen this before. There was a $7 million match on the table. That's crazy money from one individual. So,
Some people got money.
yeah, some people got money. Yeah, somebody's Wall Street account was looking good the day somebody called to ask. But we need to understand the context we're working in, and it's not the old one we were in, it's not this exact moment in time. We need to make this system able to adapt as the world continues to move. Yes, we are focused on a 5-year deadline, yes, we are focused on what happens with a version of a renewal, but we need to focus on building a system that we know where the next dollar is gonna be spent, regardless of if it's our dollar or another dollar. And how this system can transform how we think of 3 counties operating together as a region into a region making decisions. So I look forward to the conversation. I think that is something that the Oversight Committee has been urging us to do, sit there every third Monday, with my camera off, lifting up the fact that we have community folks who have given so many hours to understanding this deeply. And that's another value I hold is, as we bring more government voices in, I don't want to lose the community voice. So really appreciate that you had those slides about all those conversations that you've had, and we'll continue to have them. So thank you.
Councilor Lewis. I appreciate that. And I'm hoping that the course that we're hearing from you all today will be reflected in the conversations we have between now and the next work session as we brief you. And then, as Councilor Gonzalez mentioned earlier, the folks who are on the ground doing this work, we talked about these federal cuts and the state cuts really being on the backs of some of the most vulnerable. Also, the folks who take care of those people, keep those folks in your mind. There's nothing worse than having to say no to somebody when they're really in need of help.
Seeing no hands raised, I'll just add to the chorus. I will just ditto just about everything that's been said about regionalizing the system. I want to acknowledge that having served at the city level, having served at the county level, having really watched in different topics how we work together and how long we've been trying to regionalize the system, and how much time and effort has gone into that conversation. And it didn't really start to happen until there was actual money on the table. So there's a really good impetus to move forward. But at this point, and actually, I hate to say the low-hanging fruit has been dealt with, but the easy stuff for regionalization has been accomplished. The harder stuff is yet to come. And it doesn't mean giving up autonomy as a county to create a regional system. And I think we have to figure out how to balance those things as we move forward, because it's going to create benefit for more people to figure out how we can all play a part in filling the gaps. Because it could be that one county can do one thing much more easily than another county. So I think if we can keep that bigger picture alive, and that we're all starting to work together and make decisions according to the outcomes, not just a number of people served, because we really don't know. That's what all our questions have been, Yesenia, and you started to be able to answer them, right? As well, how are the people actually being successful or becoming stable? Not just the number of people served, because that doesn't purport to what we're seeing on the street. It doesn't match up to what people's perspectives are versus what good has been accomplished. So I guess that's my big point going forward, is that we're all going to have to give a little to get a regional system. But I think we're going to get more back. The rate of return is going to be higher if we can figure out how to fill in the gaps region-wide and work together. So I see the beginnings of that already, so I'm very heartened by that. But it's going to take some time and difficult discussions about how to move forward. So thank you. And thank you all for being the first 5 years of this conversation, and really putting a lot of those questions and issues out on the table. And while they all haven't been resolved yet, I feel like we're starting to make progress of checking off the boxes. So thank you. Councilor Lewis, did you have anything else to add, or?
Oh, I think I left it up.
Okay.
Zombie hands.
With that, seeing no other hand raised, thank you
Thank
to
you.
both of you for moving us forward. Okay. We'll move on to our Chief Operating Officer, Melissa Madrigal, for any updates.
Just very quickly, we continue to monitor the possibility of the National Guard in Portland, as well as, associated events and marches. The march for Saturday, one of the starting points is again OCC Plaza. So we'll be working with OCC and others to identify any operational impacts of that activity, and we'll continue to provide you updates. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselors, any updates? I will just thank the counselors that were part of the video that almost went viral. Very close to viral.
I did find
As
it.
anything in Metro
It's
has
viral.
gone viral.
It's
except,
viral.
Except for Tula.
95,000 uses
95,000.
viral.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
In trying to make sure that the
Shoulder stuff,
naked bike protest was safe as they were on our property with respect. And acknowledging that there would be children around as that protest kicked off, so thank
And
you.
cultural events.
Yes,
There was an indigenous marketplace.
yes,
happening.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly. Counselor Rosenthal.
Yeah, first, kudos to the Cheeky Three and the message of respect at the convention center. I think it's a nice thing. It shows that Portland has a sense of humor. But I also wanted to bring up one point a little bit more with Representative Nguyen. A historical note. Her importance was, I had no contact with her, so I can't say I can testify that she was a passionate person in her legislative efforts, but we also need to remember that she was part of a group of 5 Vietnamese people who had come here from Vietnam after the end of the war in Vietnam, and she was part of a group that said, in spite of the problem and the devastation we wreaked on Vietnam, they came and they participated actively in our government and contributed to society. So I think remembering her also needs to remember the contribution of the Vietnamese community in our neighborhood, and also needs to think about, now that we have a tentative peace accord in Gaza, we have to think back and remember what we did in Vietnam. 300,000 people killed, 50,000 Americans. So her passing should give us a moment for reflection, as well as moments of thanks for her activism. Thank you.
Thank you for that recognition. Anything else, Council? All right, with that, this meeting is adjourned, and our next regularly scheduled meeting is October 21st, 2025 at 10:30 a.m. See you all there.